These tubes right here are gonna save you a lot of money. Sup fellow creatives, it's good to see you again, and I hope you've had an awesome week. So these tubes right here will help you get really close to your subject. And as you can see right here, it's just an empty hole. So what this actually does is this will make the distance between your sensor and your subject longer, which enables you to focus closer on your subject. Because as you may or may not know, every lens has its minimal focusing distance. This lens right here has a minimal focusing distance of 0.4 meter or 1.31 feet. And this is a 50 millimeter. Alright, so the first reason why you should go for this solution instead of buying a dedicated macro lens is that this only cost me 50 euros compared to buying a dedicated macro lens that would have probably costed me around 800 to 900 euros. And if you're not really sure whether or not you really like macro photography or you need it for some of your clients, then this is the perfect way to discover that. So the extension tubes that I bought have two different parts. It consists of one tube that is 12 millimeters and one tube that is 24 millimeters. And the benefit of having two different tubes is that you can stack them on each other so you can get closer to your subject, but you can also get them apart so you can get a bit further away from your subject. So you have different kind of options with these tubes. Alright, let's show you some different examples from how much closer I can really get with these tubes and how these photos look like. Okay, so a little disclaimer. I know that these photos aren't tech sharp and that you probably need to shoot them at f5.6 to f8, but because I don't have the best lighting to expose my product perfectly, I needed to get a higher aperture. So yeah, the first photo we have right here is shot with a 50 millimeter. So first we're going to discuss the shots I shot with the 50 millimeter with a different kind of extension tubes, and then we're going to review the shots that I shot with my 35 millimeter. So this is the shot with a 50 millimeter without extension tubes, and I can't get any further than this because it has a minimum focusing distance of 0.4 meter or 1.30 feet. When we're going over to the next shot, you can see we're getting already way closer than before. And this is shot with a 12 millimeter extension tube. And not everything is tech sharp, but as I mentioned before, it's shot at an aperture of 3.2 to get it okay exposed. In the next shot we have right here this is shot with a 24 millimeter extension tube. So this is already way closer than the one before. And it's getting quite darker right here because you lose some light of the studio light I have right here because the camera gets closer to the subject. And in the last photo right here, we shot it with the 50 millimeter and the two extension tubes combined. So we have the 12 millimeter together with the 24 millimeter, which makes it 36 millimeter. As you can see, you can get really close to your subject. So now we're going over to the shots I took with the 35 millimeters. This is the closest I could get without the extension tubes. And I shot this at f2.8. This is the shot I got with the 12 millimeter extension tube. This is the shot I got with the 24 millimeter extension tube, and because the 35 millimeter focal length is a bit further, I had to get really close to the subject, as you can see, and not everything is that sharp. I have quite some blurriness in the photo, and I had to pump my ISO up to 2500 right here. And the closest we could get is this. So these are the two extension tubes combined again. The 24 with the 12 millimeters, which makes it 36 millimeters, And as you can see, everything is quite blurry, but that's because we had to pump up the ISO this hard and because we shot it at f3.2. But if you want, you can get really close. But there are a few things to consider before buying these tubes. The first thing is that you need to make sure that you buy it for the right mount. I've got a Canon EOS R, so I had to buy tubes for the RF mount. Another thing that you should watch out for is that you buy extension tubes with these electrical pins, because this enables your camera to still connect and talk to your lens. Because otherwise you would have needed to manual focus everything, you couldn't dial in your aperture anymore, and also your ISO and other things. Another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes autofocusing is quite hard, even though your lens is connected to your camera through electrical pins or not. Because when you're getting really close to your subject, it's sometimes better to manual focus, and if you can, to even use a tripod. And you also have to keep in mind that because you're this close to your subject, your aperture gets actually a bit higher, and this means that you also have to dial in a higher aperture on your camera. So instead of trying to shoot at like f1.2, you have to shoot at f4 to get everything tack sharp from this close. Especially if your lens or your camera isn't image stabilized, then you should definitely try to use a tripod or manual focus if it's giving you a really hard time to use autofocus. Another thing to keep in mind is that when using these kind of extension tubes, you lose a bit of light. Not a ton, but you will definitely need to go to a higher aperture or to use a softbox like I'm using, or to get a lot of natural light. And people also talk about having quality loss when using these extension tubes. But to be honest, I haven't really noticed any myself. So I don't think you should be afraid of this. And the last point that you should keep in mind is that these work better with closer focal lengths. So I use it on a 50 to 35mm lens and on a 50mm lens. And on those lenses it works perfect. But if you use it on a telephoto lens, you won't get that much result as you've had with these other kind of focal lengths. So the things you have to keep in mind haven't really hindered me at all though, talking from my own experience. I just wanted to inform you about it so you won't get surprised when you actually buy these extension tubes. And will a dedicated macro lens give you better results? Yeah, probably. But if you're looking to get into macro photography and you want to try it, or you don't have the budget to buy a dedicated macro lens, this is a perfect solution for you. And you know the drill, guys. If you think this video was valuable, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to see more valuable content like this in the future. Creators, see you in the next one. Khan out. Peace.